What's going on YouTube? It's Teach, back again with another video. And today, coming at you with my updated grades for the 2019 draft class, going team by team to evaluate what were the big wins and where were maybe some of the biggest losses from this year's draft class. Excited to bring this video your way. Be sure to hit the like button here so it would help me and the channel out a ton if you enjoyed today's video. And hey, if you like today's video, want to see more football content like this, hit that big red subscribe button. And of course, most importantly, leave me your thoughts down below in the comments section. Who's your favorite team? What would you regrade the 2019 draft class for your squad? Who do you think some of the biggest winners and who some of the biggest losers were from this year's draft? Love to hear your thoughts down below in the comments section. But tomorrow we're going to do the redraft for the 2019 draft class, and I'm actually really excited. That's going to be a really fun video. But let's go ahead and jump into this regrade, starting off with the Arizona Cardinals, which is a tricky one, right? Because, Byron Murphy thinks a good player. Zach Allen's starting to come into his own. But they're both gone now. So we're now at these draft classes where a lot of these pieces are not on the team where they play or where they were drafted to, which makes these grades really kind of hard to gauge. But, Arizona still has that future franchise quarterback asset in Kyler Murray. I to me, personally, still think he can be a franchise guy and you can win, a couple of playoff games, make a Super Bowl push with Kyler Murray. I think he's somewhere in that, when he's playing and on his game, somewhere in that, QB 8 to 10 range pretty comfortably. And then maybe there's room to grow beyond that. So I'll go B here for Arizona because you got Kyler Murray. But if you still had Byron Murphy, if you still had Zach Allen on the roster, then this probably goes up to B+ range, specifically Byron Murphy, because I did like him a lot coming out of Washington. Felt like he's played some good football of late. But all in all, not the worst draft that Steve Keim had during his tenure. Now, granted, again, he did have Kyler Murray fall into his lap with the #1 overall pick, and the alternative was Josh Rosen. So pretty easy decision to make there. Atlanta Falcons, building up the right side of that offensive line with Lindstrom and McGarry, really solid picks there. Not a whole lot else to really talk about. Kendall Sheffield hasn't really worked out. John Kaminsky's not there anymore. So it's really those two picks on the right side of the offensive line that have worked out pretty well. They fit their identity for that team right now. So I'll go B+ for Atlanta. I think those two picks have paved the way for them to maybe have a shot at winning the division this year. And, with Arthur Smith eventually coming along, those are two huge pieces to how he wants to run that offense. Baltimore Ravens. So I can't account the Marquise Hollywood Brown trade in as a part of this value, but they essentially took him with a first here and then flipped him for another first that became a starting center. So, I'm not really supposed to be, accounting for that, but it is alive in the back of my mind, so to speak. Jalen Ferguson I thought could be interesting, but not much there. Miles Boykin, go Notre Dame, but not a great NFL receiver. Justice Hill, Ben Powers is an okay player, and then the legend that is Trace McSorley to round out this draft class. It wasn't the most impactful, but again, Hollywood Brown was good for a while. He was in Baltimore, and then he eventually becomes another first-round pick. So I'll go B-. I feel like I can't really go any lower than that. Solid draft, but we've definitely seen better from the Ravens. Buffalo Bills. So they just extended Ed Oliver, who, I think has been a good player. And the best thing I can say about that contract was at least they didn't force themselves or get themselves in a spot where they're paying top-of-the-market money for a guy who's just not there yet. And also, Ed Oliver's just now 25. So there is reason to think the next 3 to 4 to 5 years are the best years of his career, and he's probably coming off his best year in the NFL as well. So feels like a guy who's trending in the right direction. So, maybe slow to start, but a pick that, especially now that he's been re-signed, I'm optimistic about where he goes moving forward. Cody Ford's not there. Devin Singletary's like, textbook league average running back. Dawson Knox, solid player. He got an extension as well, and not a whole lot else to really talk about. So it's really Knox and it's Oliver, and then some okay contributions from Singletary that makes this into, let's go B+. I think Oliver's starting to come into his own. Knox, I know they just drafted Kincaid, but there have been plenty of weeks where he has been, their next best receiving weapon behind Stephon Diggs. Like I've been, kind of hammering this point all offseason where they need one more wide receiver. I hope they signed DeAndre Hopkins because of that. But there have been times where Dawson Knox had to step up and they've been trying to draw him open essentially and make him that number 2 threat. It hasn't been bad, but, somewhere between B and B+, but they got the extension worked out with Oliver and I'm optimistic about his upside. So I'll lean B+. Carolina Panthers, I'm a huge Brian Burns guy, so love that pick, but unfortunately, everything else was just an absolute miss. Like, Greg Little's not on the roster anymore, Will Greer, LOL, remember when we thought that could be something? Dennis Daly, not a good football player, and not in Carolina anymore, so this is a B, and 98% of it is on the back of Brian Burns, but really good football player, one of the best, edge rushers in the game, especially from like a speed rush standpoint, and one of my favorite players in the league. So maybe I'm a little biased here, but I'll go with a B for Carolina. Chicago, David Montgomery, and then the rest is pretty forgettable. Duke Shelley is now on like his third team in as many years. We'll see, but he's not in Chicago, so, not a great look there for the Bears. They didn't have a first or second rounder this year. So a lot of me wants to go D plus here because the best thing that came out of this was a running back in the third round who, by the way, is not in Chicago anymore. So yeah, I'll stick by it. I'm going to go D plus here for the Bears. I know they didn't have a first or second rounder, so maybe you could plead with me and make the grade move to C minus, but they didn't take advantage of the picks that they had. Didn't have a first or second rounder. That's not my fault. So D plus for the Bears. The Bengals. So yeah, Jonah Williams. I thought he was better at guard. I figured that projection made a lot more sense for him. I'm really interested to see if they can convince him to make that flip to right tackle. And if so, can he be better than Lyle Collins? And can he be that he was there all along, but he was the missing piece that they were looking to cap off that offensive line? Realistically, then Orlando Brown Jr. is the missing piece. But hopefully you get what I'm trying to say. Maybe that move to right tackle is best for Cincy, but also for Jonah Williams as well. Drew Sample's fine. Jermaine Pratt's actually a really good football player, and they got him on a steal in that re-signing this offseason. So glad to see he stayed in Cincinnati. I say that as a Steelers fan. I'm glad for Bengals fans that they get to keep a good player and get him on an affordable cap number as well. Ryan Finley, Michael Jordan got to play some, but he wasn't all that special. And there's really not a whole lot else to really talk about here. It's Jonah Williams who's been, fine, I guess. Not coming off a rough year, but before that was an okay enough tackle. And then Jermaine Pratt, who's a pretty good player at off-ball linebacker. So I'll go C flat. But I could see a world where, next offseason, I bump this grade up to a B or somewhere thereabout because Pratt looks awesome. And again, he's making no money. And then Jonah Williams moves over to right tackle and it all comes together. So depending on what happens with Jonah Williams this year, this grade is, in a position where it could move up. But for right now, I'll go with C for Cincinnati. Then we get to the Cleveland Browns, and yeah, pretty much all the names worth noting here are not on the roster anymore. I was always kind of waiting for the Grady Williams breakout. Never happened. This team drafts corner really well. Now he's in Philadelphia, and in case of an injury to some of those older guys, I wouldn't be surprised if this is the year where Grady Williams breaks on the scene. But, that's just me holding on to how much I liked him out of LSU. Sione Takitaki is, fine. He's one of the guys actually still in Cleveland. Mac Wilson, not a Brown anymore. Austin Seibert, he's a kicker. So yeah, this was a tough one to grade, and I normally like Cleveland's draft classes, but D+. I feel like this one didn't really move the needle whatsoever for this squad. Taki I guess still plays, but everyone else is gone, and even Sione Takitaki is average. It's probably the best thing I could say about him. So yeah, I'll go with the D+ there for the Browns. Dallas Cowboys, Tristan Hill, that's a bit of a swing and a miss, but Connor McGovern's a good player. I don't know why this is Troy Pollard. That's 100% supposed to say Tony Pollard. But anyways, that weird point aside, Donovan Wilson, another guy they just re-signed to, solid football player. So, the hits in this class are all at positions of low value, right? Center, running back, safety. So, it's not the biggest wins of, the NFL draft here in this 2019 class. But those are three solid starters and three players they're all leaning on pretty heavily. So I'll go with a B. I think it's a solid class, and I think they got some good players and some good spots and good value. Third, fourth, and then a safety in the sixth. Can't complain about that. Then we get to the Denver Broncos, and Noah Fant's not in Denver anymore. He's a part of the Russell Wilson trade. Dalton Reisner they haven't brought back yet. Drew Lock. Another part of that Russell Wilson trade is the nicest way I can put it. And then Draymond Jones. Draymond Jones is like the shining light here of this class for the Broncos. So he himself boosted this up to, I'll call it, I'll go C flat. Nah, C plus. I'll go C plus. Draymond Jones was a little bit of a late bloomer, but those last 2 years in Denver, he was a really solid pass rusher. Fant, while he was there, was a pretty productive tight end. And then he and Locke net you Russell Wilson. We'll see where that goes. And then Dalton Reisner wasn't great, and I'm pretty sure he's still in the free agent market. But while he was there, he was, there's a shortage in the NFL of starting caliber offensive linemen, and Dalton Reisner was a starting caliber lineman. So I'll go with a C here, but a lot of that is Draymond Jones because everything else is not the best. Then we get the Detroit Lions, TJ Hawkinson, 8th overall pick. It's flipped for a day 2 pick this year, so taking that a little bit into account. Jelani Tavai, swing and a miss there. Will Harris, solid player. Austin Bryant, thought he could have been more. Amani Oruwariye goes from 6 picks to lead the team 2 years ago to getting cut midway through last season, so interesting player. Travis Fulgham, go ODU. He's had some moments in his career, but none of them came in Detroit. Ty Johnson's fine. And that kind of basically sums it up. Honestly, I don't even know if that really sums up this class. You could call it fine because they got some good production of Hawkinson while he was there. I'm going to go C minus. This really was not a great class. And, if not for what I know they end up getting for Hawkinson, good production, and then a second round pick, this is probably in D territory. But I'll go C minus because I am taking that that trade to the Vikings into account here. Green Bay Packers. And man, these first 3 picks are really hard for me to hate. I know Darnell Savage has been a little up and down. He's kind of a boomer bust guy, but I still like Darnell Savage. Rashawn Gary has been an awesome, process type of pick where you see the tools, you see the traits. We're going to take a shot on him and trust our ability to develop those skills. And he's developed into one of the better edge rushers in football. And then Elton Jenkins, great guard and a really good tackle. Like, a lot of the same stuff I said about Jonah Williams could be applicable to Jenkins, but Jenkins just does both positions at a much higher level. So yeah, those first 3 picks, I'm going to put it in A-. Everything else down the rest of the board isn't really anything special, but Gary to me is a hit. Jenkins is certainly a hit, and I still like Darnell Savage a good bit, so I'm going to go A- for the Packers. Texans, Titus Howard, I think, is actually a solid tackle, starting to kind of hit his stride. Lonnie Johnson, I really did like him a ton, kind of coming out of Kentucky, but that did not work out. Max Sharpig, fine, whatever. Charles Omenihu, but his best play has not come in Houston, and then not much else to really talk about. So this is kind of Titus Howard and not much else, so C-, because Howard's kind of hitting his stride, but he's still, right now probably middle of the league worthy tackle, somewhere in that, if you're ranking all 64 starting tackles, he's probably somewhere right there in the middle, maybe even on the lower side of that. So C- there for Houston, but Howard has the chance to change that grade by himself this upcoming season if he continues to build upon his success over the last year or so. Colts. This is a weird one because, Rod Ya-Sin had some okay games there, but nothing really crazy, and they traded out of the first round, and they ended up getting him. I liked him a fair amount. Presbyterian transfer to Temple. I thought there was something there, but he's kind of fine enough. And then, Paris Campbell, flashes, but nothing more. But then you get Bobby Okereke, who has been a little up and down, but that's a solid linebacker to draft in the 3rd round. And then on that point, let's go ahead and jump down a couple of names. EJ Speed, who is in line to start this year right next to Shaq Leonard. So great value there for a 5th round pick. And there in between, Kari Willis, who retired after like 3 or 4 years in the league, but he was a baller in Indianapolis. So he was one of my favorite players actually to watch week in and week out. So, I think there was actually some really solid names they added to the roster. Granted, linebacker, safety, linebacker, not the highest positions of value. So, I'll go B-. There's some nice wins in there, and Rock Ya-Sin's, I think, okay enough throughout a majority of his time in Indianapolis, but this definitely wasn't, the greatest draft we've seen from Ballard and crew in Indy. Jags. This is another tough one because my love for Brian Burns, Josh Allen is kind of like the poor man's version of that. I do like him a lot. And Juwan Taylor, slow start, but last year really picked it up and was a huge part of that, offensive line turning around, and really midway through last year, the Jags kind of turning it around. Kept a clean pocket, as much as he could for Trevor Lawrence. He was one of the best pass protecting tackles. That's why Kansas City goes out and, gives him the bag this offseason. Josh Oliver, athletic tight end, good blocker, but nothing crazy. Quincy Williams doesn't play for the Jags anymore. Gardner Minshew, nice story. Actually started for them. Okay production and actually solid value for a 6th rounder when you think about it. But not a Jacksonville Jaguar anymore. So it's Allen. Everyone else is pretty much outside the picture, but they got some okay play from Minshew and Juwan Taylor. So I'm going to go with a solid B. This feels like a pretty good draft class. Allen's that potential superstar piece in the mix. You got some good play from some other guys that were on the roster, and I wish they could have kept around Juwan Taylor, but I also understand where it was a lot of money to give up to a guy who really only has 1 solid year worth of production. So I understand the business side of it. Plus, they were tight on cap space from all their free agent spending 2 off seasons ago. All right, then the Kansas City Chiefs. Another tricky one to grade because, Mecole Hardman was kind of this knee-jerk reaction pick. Oh, we're going to lose Tyreek Hill. We need another speed guy. And Hardman, was fine enough. Nice yak player, gadget, gimmick, special teams guy. He did enough. Juan Thornhill is actually, I think, one of the more underrated players at the safety position. But the Chiefs have such a deep and consistent rotation in the safety room where he was playing like 600-ish snaps a year, so we didn't get to see a whole lot of him. Now he's in Cleveland. Kalen Saunders, I don't really think is all that great. We'll see what he is in New Orleans, but I'm, at best. Rashad Fenton was actually a pretty nice player for that defense, and then, not in Kansas City anymore. And then Darwin Thompson was a running back that I thought could have been Isaiah Pacheco before Isaiah Pacheco, but not. That didn't end up happening. So, it's like a bunch of okay names, solid production from a lot of these guys. Thornhill, I think, is probably the best player of the bunch. I got to go with a C, though. Fenton was good for the scheme. Hardman, did enough to stay on the roster year in, year out. And Thornhill, they didn't really fully maximize that. You could say maybe C+ because of where I feel about Thornhill, but I'm going to go with a C flat for Kansas City. Los Angeles Chargers. Yeah, this is going to be one of the lowest grades I give out because Jerry Tillery, again, Notre Dame fan here, but that was a miss. This year, Adderley, not on the Charger anymore. Trey Pipkins, sorry. If you are believing this is going to be his breakout season, I am glad that you feel that way. I'm not a Trey Pipkins guy. Drew Tranquil still on the roster, but he's now behind, third-round pick Dion Henley, behind the signing in Eric Kendricks. So what's his path to the field look like? Easton Stick, and not much else. So I'll go with the D+, because, Tranquil, yeah, maybe at worst is a solid special teamer. And then maybe this is the year where Pipkins breaks out. Again, we'll do this, video again next offseason. So D+ with the potential to move up into C+, ish territory if Pipkins really hits his stride, and maybe even the Bs. We'll see. Then we get to the Los Angeles Rams. Taylor Rapp's a player I always really liked, coming out of Washington. Just my kind of safety in a lot of ways. Darrell Henderson, a solid provider and contributor in the backfield. David Long, okay. Bobby Evans, okay. Greg Gaines actually might be the best value pick of this entire draft class for the Rams. David Edwards had to see in the field. And then Nick Scott, if it's not Gaines, it's probably Nick Scott in there. So I'll go with a B-. Again, a lot of the wins here are at positions of low value, right? D-tackle, running back, a couple of safeties. You wish you could have had those wins at bigger spots, but I think Scott was a pretty good player. Rapp now in Buffalo, but still a solid player that, had some big moments, and especially in that Super Bowl run, came up big for the Rams from time to time. Henderson, a part of that Super Bowl run, solid player. And then Greg Gaines, actually a big part of that defensive line, that was a big reason why they won the Super Bowl, right? Like I'm not saying he's as good as Aaron Donald, but he was a big reason why that run game was as good. He kind of freed up Donald to focus on being a pass rusher. He was kind of an overlooked player, but he was a big part of that Rams defense the last couple of seasons. Miami Dolphins, Christian Wilkins, one of the most underrated players in the league, in my opinion. Stud. So that's starting out on the right note. Michael Dieter, that didn't work out. Andrew Van Ginkel, fine enough player, but, not a mainstay there in Miami. I don't think he finished his rookie contract with the Dolphins, actually, before he went to New England. And then Myles Gaskins, he got some run out of the backfield, but, was, fine enough. It's just pretty much Christian Wilkins and nobody else. So I'll go with a B. I love Christian Wilkins, especially after what I saw last year. So it could even move up in that B+ territory, but for right now, I'm going to go B for Miami. Minnesota Vikings, Bradbury, coming off probably his best season of his career, which is not saying a lot, but it does feel like he's trending in the right direction. He is a good scheme fit, specifically from a run blocking standpoint, but he just has next to no play strength. I'm not saying I'm stronger than him, but for an NFL player's sake, he's definitely towards the bottom of the league, especially for a starting offensive lineman. So it gets problematic in pass pro. Irv Smith Jr., it's another year in the books where we're waiting for this Irv Smith Jr. breakout. Alexander Madison, RB1 season for him. And then Armand Watts, Marcus Epps. Marcus Epps is actually a pretty good player, but not for Minnesota, unfortunately. And then not a whole lot else. Shout out to Rick Spielman. Look at all these day 3 picks. He took 3 picks in the first 102 selections of the draft, and then just loaded up on 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th rounders. That was the Rick Spielman way of doing business, and there's some validity to that, but also it's do you need that many 7th rounders? Really? Okay. Anyways, getting off that soapbox, it's really not a great draft, to be honest with you. I'll go with a C. Madison, if he has a crazy year, C+, maybe you move this to a B-, but you got a running back, we'll call him a starting center in Bradbury, and then the potential that is Irv Smith, I guess. So we'll go with a C there for the Vikings. New England Patriots. This is, if memory serves, this is going to be the lowest grade that I give out. Damian Harris, let's start with the positive. I like Damian Harris, but he's in Buffalo now, so that's the downside of that. Stidham's in Denver. N'Keal Harry, we know how that ended. Joe Juwan Williams. We all focus on N'Keal Harry for good reason, but Joe Juwan Williams, too. Those are 2 big misses to start. Chase Winovich never really figured it out in New England. I thought he would be a great Patriot type, but it just never really came together for him. And then, I already mentioned, and Jake Bailey. I feel like every Patriots fan hates Jake Bailey, too. So, sorry, Bill Belichick, but I'll go D-. I won't go F because Damian Harris, and I do like Damian Harris a good bit. So I'll go D- there for the Patriots. Disappointing draft for sure. Saints, Eric McCoy, okay, good enough. He's a starting caliber center. Again, there's a shortage across the NFL in starting caliber offensive linemen, so give him credit there. Got a starter. Johnson Gardner-Johnson's a big win here. And then, Caden Ellis started to figure out a role and started to become a decent pass rusher for this team. So I'm going to go B-. It'd be a lot higher if Chauncey Gardner-Johnson was still in the roster because it's you can still hang your hat on that 4th round hit. But, a couple starters and one of the best players at their kind of hybrid position in C.J. Gardner-Johnson, and a big part of why that defense was as good as it was while he was there in NOLA. All right, the Giants. Daniel Jones, he will still go in the 1st round in tomorrow's redraft, actually, but he would not be the 6th overall pick. And, they just extended him, and that's a front office and a coaching staff that had no need to really do that, right? Brian Dable didn't draft him. Joe Shane didn't draft him, so They could have been like, hey, you're coming off a career year. That's great. He'll go hit the market and get your money. Like, they easily could have just closed the door in his face. But they decide to, give him some money, $40 million a pop, and with the guarantees, it feels like he's going to be their quarterback for at least the next 2 seasons. And then we'll see where it goes from there. But yeah, I'm not necessarily the biggest Daniel Jones believer, but if Brian Daboll wants to bring him back, that gives me more confidence that this could work out. Dexter Lawrence, Sexy Dexy, one of the best D tackles in football, so that's a big win. DeAndre Baker, yikes. O'Shane Ximines, go ODU, but yeah, that pick hasn't really worked out. Julian Love, actually one of the more underrated free agent signings this year, and one of the more overlooked, draft picks of this year's class. I really wanted to get him in the first round of tomorrow's redraft, but I just couldn't. So yeah, really solid player, good slot option, could play true safety, could play strong safety, even had some experience starting on the outside for the Giants and at Notre Dame. So just a solid football player. Darius Slayton's back in New York as well. We'll see what he develops into. Seen flashes, but haven't seen it all come together. I'll go B+. A lot of the guys, the 2 guys on the roster, or 3 guys on the roster, quarterback, a star D tackle, and then Darius Slayton, who is a bit of a TBD, but 2 of those 3 guys play high position values, or spots of high position value, and then one's one of the best players at his position in Dexter Lawrence, so that's big. And then you got some okay production from Julian Love while he was on the roster, and so I can't hate that too much. I'll give the Giants a B+. Then to the Jets, Quinnen Williams emerging as one of the best defensive tackles in football, so that's a big win there for the Jets, but really nothing else to talk about here. So this is a B on the back of Quinnen Williams and pretty much nobody else. Ja'Kai Polite, remember that name? Remember when we thought he could be a stud at Florida? He was in like all these way too early first-round mocks, and then every game he played at Florida, he just started to slide, and then the combine, and then the interviews, and still went in the top 100, but did not last in the league very long. Just always a name that I see it, I'm like, wow, what could have been? The Raiders. I'm going to give this class a good grade, but because of their 4th-round hit, Max Crosby, 5th-round hit, Hunter Renfrow. Let me just start with the grade, B+. Trayvon Mullen also kind of had some optimism about him, but those 2 day 3 hits carry the weight of this draft class. Then you have one of those 3 first-rounders work out. Unfortunately, though, it was at running back. And, that was kind of the problem with this draft. Jonathan Abrams, a box safety, and he really only could do one thing. So was he worth first-rounder? I would argue no, and ultimately results would argue the same. Clelin Ferrell, if they traded back to, let's say, 16 and took him, I have no problem with that pick. Take him in the top 4 over guys like Brian Burns and Rashawn Gary and, plenty of the other edge rushers. Hell, Max Crosby. That's one that you look back on and you're like, yikes, that could have been a lot better. So, yeah, I'll go B+ because of those, day 3 hits plus Josh Jacobs, but this could have been A++ if those other 2 first-rounders worked out for the then Oakland Raiders. Then we get to the Philadelphia Eagles, Andre Dillard. I thought this was the same class where they got Jordan Mailata, but I guess not. Dillard loses his job to Mailata, so that's a tough first-round pill to swallow. Miles Sanders, he's a solid running back, part of a committee, but it's a team that prioritizes having depth at running back, so he wasn't necessarily the needle mover as much as they just had a good committee as a whole. J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, and then not much else to talk about. Arcega-Whiteside also a bust. So, yeah, this is a weird one for me to give out. I'll go D+. I mean, the only name to really come out of this with any sort of like positive difference to Philadelphia was Miles Sanders. But again, I don't know if you take Sanders out of that committee if it changes that much. Like if you just took Sanders away from Philly, plugged in another average running back, does it change a whole lot? Does that prevent them on going on a Super Bowl run last year? I don't think it does. So, yeah, I'll go D+ there for Philadelphia. Weird draft there for Howie Roseman. Let me get the Steelers. Yeah, this one is going to be a one-person grade pretty much all over again. Deontay Johnson. Deontay Johnson is really the only thing that's worked out of this class. I used to be super excited about the idea of Devin Bush going to Pittsburgh to make the move up to 10. I'm like, okay, this is, the guys we traded up for beforehand were Troy Polamalu and Big Ben. Like, here we go. This is going to be the Steelers getting it done. Here we go. No pun intended. Justin Lane, I liked too coming out of Michigan State. That experiment didn't work out. Benny Snell, fine. Zach Gentry, fine, I guess. Isaiah Buggs, whatever. There's some guys who have played, and Gilbert III was a nice special teams player, I guess, for a little bit. But yeah, Deontay Johnson, by far and away the biggest contributor, and really the only main contributor when it comes to starting offense, starting defense. Forget about special teams for this video. So I'll go with a C, and 99% of it is Deontay Johnson and what I think he can be as a wide receiver. Hopefully, Matt Canada unlocks that this year. San Francisco 49ers. Yeah, those first 2 picks. Let's get this one out of the way. It's an A. They got one of the best defensive ends, maybe the best defensive end, or edge rusher, we'll say, in Nick Bosa. And they got one of the best receivers in football, and they took him to a place that was perfect for Deebo Samuel and his skill set. So, yeah, it's an A. Plus, then you throw in Dre Greenlaw, who is the other half of the best linebacker tandem in football with Fred Warner and himself. You get him in the 5th round. Yeah, this is an A. You draft a punter in the 4th round. Something about San Francisco. They like drafting these special teamers in the 3rd and 4th rounds. It's like It's like those people who play fantasy football and they draft their starting lineups and then they're like, all right, well, I'm going to get this first kicker. And when really the value it doesn't make that much of a difference. But anyways, another soapbox I'll step off of. But yeah, A here for San Francisco. A big part of the roster that we know now for the 49ers formed in this 2019 class. Seattle Seahawks, LJ Collier. Yikes, that one didn't work out. Marquise Blair, another yikes. But to the rescue comes DK Metcalf. Obviously, a big part of this grade is going to be the fact they drafted a superstar wide receiver with the last pick in the second round. That is a win of all wins. Another name to note here, Phil Haynes, scheduled to be a starter this year. So, okay. Ugo Amadi, I had some hopes for, but never really worked out. Ben Burkervin, dope name. Didn't really translate as a player. And then Travis Homers had to, fill in and become a, third down back from time to time. Sometimes he gets some starts because of injuries. So, it's basically DK Metcalf and a couple other contributors, we'll call them. I'll get B flat here for Seattle. Superstar wide receiver, starting guard, decent enough running back. Not a whole lot else broke their way. Then we get to Tampa Bay. This is another tough one for me to grade because, like Sean Murphy Bunting, the best year of his career was his rookie season. Everything else has been a little bit downhill. Devin White, lot of flash, like boomer bust player, but over the last 2 years in specific, it's been a whole lot more bust than it has been boom. Mike Edwards is a solid player, though, and I do like Mike Edwards a lot. I'm also a big Jamel Dean guy, so I'm glad they re-signed him, keep him in Tampa Bay on a solid contract and a solid average annual salary. So glad to see him staying in Tampa. Matt Gay, had some moments, but ultimately, kind of an up and down kicker, which is the story of kickers. It feels like outside of Justin Tucker, it is. And then Scott Miller. He's fine. Speed wide receiver that drops just about everything that comes his way. So, yeah, see, I like Dean. I like Edwards. White has some big playability. I'll go B-. Again, White, when White's on his game, you could easily sell me on this as like B+ to A- range because Devin White is just a freak athlete. We don't get to see a whole lot of those types of guys make that type of an impact. But also, it's just he makes some really tough coverage. The first touchdown in Kenny Pickett's career was because Devin White didn't recognize it as a blocker release for Najee Harris. Harris post up for a second block, leaks out of the backfield as White starts to blitz, and it's a walk-in touchdown. So, Steelers fan, so I remember the first Kenny Pickett touchdown, but it's plays like that. It's those coverage misassignments. It's him trying to do too much, getting out of place, getting out of position, missing tackles. Yeah, I don't know. He's hot and cold, and right now I'm feeling more cold than hot with him. So I'll go C+ here for Tampa Bay. Then we get the Tennessee Titans. Jeffrey Simmons. This was a huge gamble for them. Was injured, and then it's kind of like what ultimately happened then with Caleb Farley. Thus, this pick with Simmons hit the high side of variance, and then Farley's hit the low side of variance so far. So Simmons, one of the best interior defensive linemen in football. He might become the guy that supersedes. Aaron Donald's the best interior defensive lineman. He's got to get through Chris Jones first, but I could see Simmons making that type of leap. Him, Quentin Williams, Christian Wilkins, and Dexter Lawrence, all these guys that can make that potential leap. A.J. Brown, this would have been an A if they still had A.J. Brown on the roster. Like, if they just paid the man, this is an A off those first two picks alone. But they don't, so, that's unfortunate. They get a first-round pick. That becomes Treylon Burks, so a little bit of a TBD there. Date Davis, no longer a Titan, was, fine enough for them. Amani Hooker's a player I like. Battles through injuries, but when he's on the field, I feel like he's a solid player, especially 2 years ago. I thought he was playing some good football. And David Long Jr., they let walk on a 2-year, $11 million contract, who I thought was a really good football player. A lot of coverage upside, but I guess Tennessee saw it differently. So it's Simmons and basically nobody else. Hooker's a good player, so I don't want to get too hyperbolic here. I'll go B+, because you did still have a handful of years where A.J. Brown was a stud, right? You still had a couple of years of Nate Davis being a reliable starter. You still got Hooker on the team. Still got Simmons who's a difference maker. But, man, if they had A.J. Brown still on the roster, this is easily in the A territory. Last team to talk about, we'll go ahead and skirt past that name just to avoid any potential controversy. YouTube, don't demonetize me, please. Dwayne Haskins, obviously, rest in peace. That's a tough one. I thought they had good process on that, waiting until he fell into their lap at 15. Montez Sweat, one of the most underrated players in the NFL, specifically at the edge rusher spot, in my opinion. Terry McLaurin, one of the best wide receivers in football, and another one of those names that feels a little overlooked when it comes to, who's the best wide receiver in football. I'm not saying he's Devontae Adams or Justin Jefferson, but feels like I don't see Terry McLaurin on a whole lot of top 10 wide receiver lists, and I feel like he should be. Bryce Love was a guy who I thought actually could be really, really good in Washington, but that didn't happen. And then Cole Holcomb is the other name really to note here from the day 3 haul. He's now in Pittsburgh, but was a solid coverage player and actually outplayed Jamin Davis for the last couple of years, the first-round linebacker, outdone by the 5th rounder. So, yeah, Sweat, McLaurin plus Holcomb. I'd be remiss not to give it at least a B+. That's where I'll go B+, because obviously they had some other big misses here, including a swing and a miss at quarterback. But those 3 guys that got out of it are damn good football players. And again, Sweat, one of the more underrated edge rushers, and Terry McLaurin to me in that top 10 conversation for best wide receivers in the NFL. But guys, that is going to do it for my regrade of the 2019 NFL Draft. Let me hear your thoughts down below in the comment section. Who's your favorite team, and what would you regrade the 2019 draft class that they had? Also, who do you think some of the big winners team-wise were and some of the biggest losers team-wise were? And then also, looking back at this, is it crazy to see some of the names that lingered till day 3? I know the wide receiver class, like, it's hard to believe so many of these guys fell to the 2nd and 3rd round. It blows my mind. But let me hear all your thoughts that you have on the 2019 draft class down below in the comments section. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Hit that like button if you did. Subscribe if you're new to the channel and want to see more football content like this. But that's going to do it for me. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Teach, and I am signing off.